Welcome to Stacy Speaks Hope, the podcast that explores the lies that have kept your little girl bound. We trust the truth of God's word to offset the lies. I'm your host, Dr. Stacy. Get ready to be empowered to become the hope-filled woman God has called you to be. I'll share some of the lies that have held me back. If you hear something that you can relate to, drop a comment in the chat and we'll talk about it. Welcome. You're back to Stacy Speaks Hope, and I'm Dr. Stacy. Wow, after my last episode, I looked back at it and I wondered how many people were thinking, why in the world do we need to uncover the story, to go back and relive the painful memories, the things that were so upsetting, that changed your life? So I wanted to just give you a little backstory to the story. What I realized is that the pain doesn't go away. It changes because I learned to see it. But what I know is even to this day, even in doing this podcast, I still see glimpses of my little girl and her wanting to hold on to things that make her feel safe. As I have talked in front of people on big stages for graduation many, many times, and I've always avoided recording myself on video. I've done it for small things, but a lot of times, even for class, there'd be, oh, I should make a video for that. And I was like, yeah, no, I'm good. So for me to take this leap of even doing the podcast is taking me outside of my comfort zone. And I have to stop and pay attention to the hesitation, the resistance of my little girl. Feeling uncomfortable, am I going to be judged? Am I going to be rejected? So as I uncover this story, I'm just trying to be vulnerable and real with you so that you know for your own life, your own story, first of all, to stop and get honest with yourself. It only was because I knew I wasn't feeling good and whole and healthy. That anger that I had for all those years, many, many years. And the anger, and when I was in high school, the anger was so bad. I've punched a bathroom door. I've punched lockers. I used to dream about fighting in middle school. So when I'm talking about rage, the word doesn't begin to describe what was going on inside of me. It was like a furnace, and it would explode like somebody threw something in it to catch it on fire and make the flame get bigger. So I didn't think that was a problem. And so we go through life having certain reactions and conducting ourselves in ways that are tied to those stories that may be buried, may need to be buried because they were so painful. My little story on a playground bullying might sound really small to somebody else. For me, it was the biggest thing I knew. Of course, at 7, who knows much of anything? But I know what happened to me was certainly not the worst thing that could have happened to anybody else. So I do not, by any stretch of the imagination, try to sit here and make it sound like my poor life because I got bullied at school. It wasn't that. And not to minimize anybody else's story. Because I know everybody has a story and they're all different. But I ask you to think about your story, to stop and just get still and quiet so that you can look in the mirror at yourself, see who's looking back, look into your own eyes. The image that I show connected to my podcast that really strikes my heart and has gotten reaction from people of all walks of life, all ages, all stages, all races, was the adult looking in the mirror and the weeping, bawling child looking out, reaching back to them. So I know there's people out there who relate to that feeling that hits you right in your heart, because it's that place that nobody talks about. Maybe we don't even have words for. I know I haven't had words for. Even to this day, this is new to talk about in this way. I have told the story, but I don't think I told it from a place of, it's not that healing is complete. The healing journey is a continuation, because it's what comes up when I act a certain way. I have to remember, is this my 7-year-old self, my 8-year-old self coming back up to protect me? I know there's a part of this that what our little girls did was to protect us. Because if nothing else, we never wanted to feel that pain again. I know in psychology, they say your personality is formed in your first 7 years. So if you've had that kind of trauma, if you've had anything that told you you were not good enough, that you were never going to be anything, that you weren't worthy, maybe the words weren't stated, but the treatment started to accumulate until something in you said, something, I may not deserve to be treated any differently. And we carry that into our life as we grow up, as we get into relationships, or as we avoid relationships, as we take chances, as we try new things. We're afraid. It's been challenging for me to step into this new space of doing this podcast, even because I'm used to knowing what I'm doing. And I don't know how to edit these things, and you can tell from the way they look that I'm still learning. And I've been up late nights trying to get these things ready because I want to commit to the posting time on Thursday mornings at 6:13 a.m. because my anchor verse in the Bible is Isaiah 61 verse 3. So that's 6:13, and it's the first half of it. So it's a.m. and it's, he will give you beauty for ashes. It's just that snippet of it, because I have seen my life come from near death because of a medical diagnosis. My kidneys were failing after my son was born, and he was only 2 months old, and I found out my body just thought my kidneys were foreign and was rejecting them. And I got blessed to get a stranger's kidney donated to me. She called me and offered me her kidney. Shout out to Kristen Wackworth. And that to me was bringing me back, because while I was waiting for us to get our surgery, I knew people who died, who were on a transplant list. So that's my story. And maybe part of that even goes back to the emotions of the rejection that I felt as a little girl. Because for sure, everything we feel goes into somewhere in our body, if we deal with it or if we don't. So I'm only sharing my story so that you can see what it's like if you haven't ever shared your story, even just with yourself. This series, I'm calling it Courageous Conversations, because after my courageous conversation with myself, I have to have my courageous conversation with God to help me deal with the things that come up as a result of uncovering this foundation of life that was lies and then became the truth over time, because one lie stacked on top of another lie, on top of another lie, that made me believe that that was how it was supposed to be. It was my learnings as a young person that caused me to believe something based on what I had seen repeated. And I just didn't know any better. So all I could do was take what I knew, believe it to be the truth, and walk forward as I got older. So I was angry. I was not going to be bullied anymore after I was bullied. And the story will continue, as I just told you at the beginning of the story. But I share all this with you to remind you, for your story, whatever it is, however you get to it, to take a moment to journal, to pray, to walk, to cry, whatever it is that you do, to get to that secret place. I call this the sacred place that we could share together. Drop in the chat if there's something about your story that I can talk about, that I can talk with you about. I want to have guests come on. Maybe I'm figuring it all out. I don't have all the answers, but I know that the people that are supposed to hear this will hear it. The people that hear it that this doesn't resonate with, it won't mean anything to them, and that's okay. As I let go of the fear of rejection, I have to also know it's like, hey, you want a cup of coffee? And you either say yes or no. And it's not a reflection of me. And it's not a reflection of them. I don't have to say they were mean people because they didn't want a cup of coffee. I just have to say they didn't want a cup of coffee. No big deal. And I'll ask somebody else. So what I ask you and bring to you today is my story, why it matters for me to tell the story, because the story is the foundation for how I see life, how I do life, how I am aware of when something happens to me. When something happened to me one day on my job and I was in the room with 3 white men, I had a flashback of being that 7-year-old little girl again. And I felt unsafe. They weren't yelling at me. They weren't cussing at me. There was no fence between us, but there was something in my spirit that said, you know what? It reminds us of that again, and I don't like it. But I couldn't react like a 7-year-old. If I ran away, I probably ran away. I don't even remember. But I couldn't run away then. I was a professional. I was running a school. So I had to be aware enough of my story, because I took the time to not be okay with being so angry for so long. And I had to stop and figure out, what is this? Why is this? I went to an event where there was a life coach giving an event one weekend. I was ready to quit my job as a principal, because I just was so frustrated and upset about how things were. I could see everything that was wrong, because that's another thing. When you get into that space, you become hypercritical and you look for what's wrong, because it's got to reinforce this bad thing that I say is going to happen, because it happened before when I was a little girl. So it has to be what's going to happen in the future. Now I'm self-fulfilling prophecy, telling the worst possible outcomes. But I walked into this event with a life coach who was able to let me see life, myself, what I could be, what I wanted to be, through different eyes. And in a weekend, I changed from wanting to quit my job to, I can go back. And I figured it out. I figured out how to see it differently, not through my own ability, but I was able to yield and surrender my way of thinking, my stinking thinking about a situation that was, sure, less than perfect. If there's humans involved, it's less than perfect. I didn't own the school. I didn't run the business. So it's always going to be different than I would do it. But the benefit of learning how to walk through this with a life coach is, a life coach can only tell you what's already inside of you. They just help you find it. They might ask you the questions that you're afraid to say out loud to yourself. So I don't expect to have all the answers for you. I'm not telling you anything, but first just look. And as you look, you can see what first you want to deal with. You take it to the Lord and let him speak to you about what you're missing out on, what he created you to be, what destiny you're not walking into, what purpose you were made for that either you're walking toward or away from because of the hindrances, because of the emotional and mental bondage, because of the triggers that keep you trapped in your own lies that have been merged into or distorted into becoming what we believe to be the truth because we don't know any different. We haven't been taught to see any different. That's just what we knew. And our parents taught us different things about how we dealt with that. In my generation and my parents' generation, what happened in the house stayed in the house. And so there was an expectation that you didn't go outside to get other input for your life. Now it's shifting, and this generation probably sells more, tells everything online because that's their norm. They're not bad or wrong. We're not bad or wrong, just different. So as we process our lives our own ways, we have to have a foundation of, is my life where I want it to be? Am I doing what I believe I was called and created to do in the earth? I've been told for years that there's a message that I'm supposed to say that people will get. And this is one way to get there. There's a book inside of me that's got aspects of what our people are waiting to hear, waiting to read. I haven't written it yet. But I can't keep going, not moving forward. This is a leap of faith, even to learn how to do this. I'm used to knowing how to do stuff. But when I don't, in this case, I just have to keep going because I have to show to myself that that bondage of that little girl who has to be perfect or they won't like me. That's the story that became my truth from the little snippet of the story that I already started sharing with you and will continue to share. That inside feeling that's shaky and nervous, it crops up. It's not gone just because I know what it is. I can name it. And I've replaced it with truth of, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. God made me how He wanted me to be. So don't expect that it's a one-shot deal. You get it and you're all set and you're done. It's no. But if you at least know what you're dealing with, that gives you a fighting chance. When you see it coming, you know how to pray, you know how to avoid, you know how to sidestep, you know how to get in your word. You got to find out what it is that God shows you for you. But it starts with that story. It starts with that truth. It starts with that acknowledgement of where you need to go and are you on the path to get there? And if not, what's in the way? And how do we get rid of it? It's a quest. It's an adventure. And it's not for the faint of heart. We learn and grow through the truths that we live by, the truths that we tell ourselves, the words we reinforce, and the words we cancel. We're in cancel culture when it comes to people that we disagree with, but we as believers need to live in cancel culture of the lies that have kept us from being everything we're supposed to be. People know me now and they see me laughing and smiling and joking. They're shocked when I tell them about my teenage years of fighting and wanting to fight. Elementary fighting because I had to, and after that fighting, I dare you to come across me because I'm going to get you. And many people just didn't because however mean I might have looked. But what I know is I'm better for it today. And there's peaks and there's valleys and these things come up again and again and again as we mature in life, as we mature in exposure, as we're exposed to more people, more situations, as we are moved up in our jobs, and the more people we come in contact with, the more opportunities there are for us to come up, and those lies come up. The lies are in our face. And either we can look past them or we can get stuck by them. All of the things that you know you're supposed to do, that you want to do even, that you've tried to do, and you freeze. That fear is real. That fear is a lie that has become your truth. And as we think about the things that we are needing and wanting to do, to be a blessing to others, to help people we've even yet to meet, because we're hesitant to get out of our comfort zone. Now's the time. Now is the time to change. Now is the time to learn a new way to do things differently. Not for accolades, not for for gratification and fulfillment, but because God needs us to act. God needs us to move. There's people hungry and waiting for what you need to share. This is not by accident. You didn't find this podcast by accident. You got invited to this podcast if you know me, and you came back again because you wanted to hear, because there was something that was said. There's something that is causing you to look at yourself in a way that maybe you haven't before. And that's okay. That's just means you weren't ready before. That just means now you're ready to start investigating and exploring what it is that you believe. What started you believing that? That's the beginning of the story. That's why we start as far back as we can remember. Because that was the beginning of the story. If it becomes a memory, then it started becoming your truth. And it didn't happen in one shot. Layers of events and things that were said and done, things that we believed, things that we hung on to. And as we get older and older, we are looking for those things to be proven. But there's another way. There's another proof that you can find for yourself that changes that thinking. So if you heard something that you want have a truth that you want to hang on to, what is it? If there's a lie that you want to let go of, what is it? First, for yourself, put it in the chat so as a community we can look at these things together. If it's private, I'll put my information so that you can do a coaching session with me. I can't even get the words out. Because it's not something you have to do alone. It's not something that you have to stay stuck in. I'm passionate about this, as you can tell. I'm not trying to be preachy. I just know what I know, and I know that there's hope to not have to keep living through a story that causes pain and trauma. And that you don't have to let your little girl stand up and run your life. I'm just sharing what I know. I'm sharing what I'm going through. Who knew starting a podcast would be connected to part of the triggers of the lies that I'm talking to people about? But that's how real it is. They're small, but I can identify them. They're not as big as they had been in the past, only because I've had a little practice at this. But I guarantee I'm not done, and there will be more. I don't guarantee that this is not the first, and it won't be the last time that I'll have to look at this fear of rejection, this fear of not being good enough, this fear of what will people think of me. I have to constantly remind myself, am I doing what God has told me to do? That's what matters. Everything else, pray about it. Some people's input you take and some people's you don't. The script that people talk about in the message I've heard in churches, you eat the meat and spit out the bones. Take what makes sense to you. Take what God reinforces to you and confirms to you in your spirit as what you hang on to, even that I say. What's for you is for you. What's not for you, don't worry about it. It might be for somebody else. That's all I can do, even in saying this, in doing this. There's part of doing this that's something God is doing in me and for me. And how much of it is for other people, I can only imagine. I can only hope and pray. I pray that this is not just for me. It's not supposed to be for me. I was told that clearly. Do not keep this in. This is not for you. Do not be afraid to step out. And I'm inviting you to step in to that place that for you is the beginning of just looking in the mirror, just looking into your own eyes to see, is there a story in there that you haven't told yourself? Is there a story that you have forgotten because it was too painful to remember? Is there a story that you know that you suppress? I'll say it again. I'm not a therapist. And some things may come up for people that they need to have a trained mental health professional talk to about. So I do not pretend for a second to say I have all the answers. I have a hand to reach out to, an email to reach out to, and an opportunity to talk if you want to speak to me one-on-one. But mostly just come back, like, subscribe, and share this so we can build a community. As I build this platform on YouTube or whatever platform you're listening to me on, I will create another community so that there will be more intimate conversations and interactions. I'm just getting started. I'm trying to be obedient to God. I'm trying to learn what to do as I go. I don't have all the ideas. I have glimpses of ideas. I have exciting things I'm working on. I have something I'm working on that I'll share soon about dealing with this process that I'm sharing with you. But I'm writing it as God gives it to me, creating it as God gives it to me, planning it, and just trying to stay listening so that I give out the right information. So thank you for coming back to Stacy Speaks Hope. Thank you for joining this time in this space. Thank you for taking time for yourself. Because most of all, I'll never know the difference, but I pray for you that you will. If you're able to just get started in the process. What is it that you're believing about yourself that might not be the truth? And most of all, what is keeping you from being everything that God created you to be? What purpose, what plan, what action has He called for you to do that you haven't been able to do because you've been held back by those things that seem, they're real. Those fears are real. And they're something that you can take to God to make it make sense. These days, that's the phrase, right? Make it make sense. I know I say it. Because if it doesn't make sense to me, I don't know what to do with it. If I'm in confusion, I can't make a decision. I can't take action. If you have something you're confused about, maybe that's the part that says, how do I go into the story? Why am I confused about this? It's layers. And some layers are buried deeper than others because of what they consist of. So there's no right or wrong answers. It's just, will you begin the process? Are you willing? Are you interested? If you need help, I hope this is the place you come to. I hope what you heard, something that I've said, makes sense and gets you curious. You don't have to know it all right now. You don't have to do it all today. It's you got to take a deep breath. It's not supposed to just be fixed in a snap, just like it didn't the foundation of who your identity is. You're through truths and lies and how they even blend together. And even that is confusing. So which is it? Especially if we're so young. So just trust your heart. Come into this place that I hope to hold as sacred. My heart is full of hope and prayers for the people that God connects to me to be blessed and to get free, because there's work for you to do and there's a calling on your life. So tune back in, and I look forward to talking to you, responding to your messages in the chat. And if you want to schedule time with me, I'll show you how to do that as well. Until we meet again, be blessed. This is Dr. Stacy at Stacy Speaks Hope. Thank you for watching Stacy Speaks Hope. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. To schedule a free coaching call, the link is in the description.